Truck drivers are protesting over vaccine mandates, causing a delay for those who are trying to cross the U.S.-Canadian border near Manitoba. You know, truckers, I think, often get overlooked when we discuss the most important jobs in this country. We often hear about first responders, police, firefighters, military, men and women, and while those jobs are extremely important in maintaining the system, people don't understand that if the police disappeared overnight, yeah, you'd have some problems, but I think most people might get by. Things may eventually start to crumble, and, we'll see exactly how that plays out. But a lot of people genuinely believe that without police, things will get along just fine. I mean, out in rural areas, there's no cops and people seem to get along. Okay, well, what about firefighters? If there's no firefighters, you'd still probably get by fine. There'd be a lot of buildings burning down. What about the military? All right, well, that's interesting because the military doesn't just go off to foreign war. They build things. There's infrastructure projects. And just the fact that we have a strong military is a deterrent for anyone who might want to attack us. So without them, okay, things would get bad. All in all, very important jobs. Bad things would probably happen if we didn't have them. If truckers, for one day, just don't show up for work, basically the entire country shuts down. All of a sudden, there's this massive derailment of the economy. Gasoline's not coming in, supplies at stores are disrupted, and that could be from just one day. So when they talk about vaccine mandates, and we see a crippling effect across the board in the economy, what they need to be warning you about is that if they impose these things on truck drivers, they could absolutely just shut down everything all at once. And that doesn't really matter what people think politically. I think it's important to point out truck drivers may be the most powerful group of people in this country, and they could probably dictate policy more than any other industry. And I mean it. If you zoom out from a map and take a look at all the roads and the highways, it looks like red blood cells moving around through the system. People are trying to work, but truck drivers are the ones that are carrying resources to and from cities. Now, if you live out here in the middle of nowhere where I do, and if we need to get food, we can actually drive ourselves a few miles to a local farm, and almost every farm has a little farm stand where they sell meats and cheeses and vegetables, and we can get foods and goods. We'll be all right. But if you live in a city, have you ever considered thanking a truck driver for the reason you have food? Most people haven't. So what ends up happening is you get many of these Democrat politicians who want hardcore mandates. And now we're seeing food shortages in the DC area and the New York area and a bunch of other states. Mainly, it seems, in areas where there are harsh lockdowns and vaccine mandates. And something I've mentioned in many segments. Not every truck driver will be concerned about vaccine mandates. I'm sure a lot of them are vaccinated. I'm sure a lot of them don't care about that political fight. But there will be many. And you don't need to get rid of every single truck driver to cause problems. If enough of these truck drivers say, I will not drive into Cook County, Chicago, basically, because there's vaccine mandates, I won't be able to use the bathroom or get food, then I'm not doing it. I won't deliver there. And the people who live there don't seem to understand why it is the cost of goods is skyrocketing. And you know what? Perhaps it's their own fault. People need to be aware of how their life functions, where their food comes from, and they need to have a plan for how they'll move forward if that stops. But for too long, people in cities have blindly relied on this system, assuming it will always be there for them. To me, that's absolutely crazy. And thus, when a Clinton advisor says it's not the Democrats that are at fault, it's that they have bad voters, blames the people, and James Carville, another strategist, says the Democrats are whiny. I think it's certainly a bad strategy to insult your own voter base. They're not wrong. The Democratic voters, in my opinion, are bad. They vote for bad policies. They destroy their areas, or more importantly, they move from areas they destroyed with bad policy by voting for it into red areas and then vote for the same bad policies because they genuinely don't know where food comes from. I'll give you an example. When Andrew Yang was running for president, and I supported him because I thought he had a great comprehensive list of policy plans, people were saying that milk comes from the store. And when I tried explaining that milk comes from the farm, sent to a processing plant, sent to a packing plant, sent then to the store, they said, what do you mean? No, it just comes from the store. I kid you not. People were saying to me, if you want milk, just go to the store. And I'd say, what happens when they can't get it in the trucks, in the bottles to the store? People were responding to me, what do you mean it's just there at the store? And I'm just like, oh man. Because what was happening was the dairy farmers couldn't get bottles. So they couldn't do anything with the dairy. The processing plants that take the milk and then turn it into cheese or cream or sour cream couldn't take it because there were no trucks and because factories were shut down. So the dairy farmers just opened up the vats and just dumped all the milk out. No joke. Democratic voters didn't understand this. And thus they elect people who pass policies which destroy the supply chain. And it reminds me very much of Idiocracy, but in the real world. You see, in the movie Idiocracy by Mike Judge, it's prophetic, by the way, they can't grow any food. Why? Because they're spraying the fields with what is effectively Gatorade. And the main character is like, what is this? Why aren't you watering the plants? And they're like, what do you mean? It's got electrolytes. It's what plants crave. And they didn't know that they were effectively salting the earth, preventing anything from growing. And so the main character just tells everyone the plants have stated they want water. And they go, from the toilet? That's where we're at. Democratic voters saying, what do you mean? The milk's just there. Not realizing there's a massive chain. They vote for idiot politicians who don't know how any of this works, who thinks that semi-automatic means you pull the trigger and it fires every round in the gun. When in fact, it means one trigger pull, one bullet comes out. But they don't know these things. So they keep voting for it and things keep getting worse. Let me show you the repercussions of what happens when you vote for these policies. You'll end up like Canada. And when Canada starts starving because no trucker wants to deliver there or literally can't, they'll come crying for help. Now, let's be real. Canada is particularly wealthy. I don't think it'll get that bad. At least I hope it won't. But at least here, we can see it starting to. Before we get started, head over to timcast.com, become a member to help support our work, everything we do here at Timcast, including these videos and all of our journalists. We are not funded by ads. No, we're in fact supported by individual memberships as a private organization. And that means we are free to do what we want. We are not beholden to any company who doesn't want us to report on something. No, we just have to make sure we're doing right by you as members, reporting the truth and doing our best jobs. As a member, you will also get access to exclusive segments on the Timcast IRL podcast. Last night, James O'Keefe, Andy No, Libby Emmons discussing their origin stories, along with Luke Rudkowski of We Are Change, why they got into journalism, the challenges they face. You're going to want to see this episode again, timcast.com. But don't forget to smash that like button, subscribe to this channel, share this video right now with your friends to help support our work directly. Let's read this story from globalnews.ca. Crossing delayed Monday at Manitoba U.S. border as truckers protest vaccine mandate. People hoping to cross the border at Emerson are having to deal with the delay Monday morning. Truckers tell 680 CJOB that a slow roll protest is delaying trucking and other traffic as some truck drivers protest the vaccine mandate for all truckers that came into effect on Saturday. Driver Jamie Throp says it took him 30 minutes to reach the border crossing from the start of the protest. That's a long time, huh? Truck drivers are circling MB-75 between Emerson Duty Free and the commercial inspection station, blocking all lanes heading south to the United States and northbound traffic coming from the USA. Throp said, bravo, gentlemen. You know, these truckers, you got to hand it to them. Doing what they do, nonviolent civil disobedience. Some people have said, hey, man, look, you're blocking regular people who have jobs and need to get to work. Nah, I'm totally in favor of all of this. I have defended the left when they've blocked roads. I know it's inconvenient, but those who make peaceful revolution impossible make violent revolution inevitable. If truckers or protesters are able to cause a shock to the system without causing long-lasting damage, it sends a message. I may not like the fact, I got to be honest, that regular people are getting jammed up in this. I've personally experienced this. When I was a kid, I remember my family was driving down the highway. I think we were coming from Minnesota or something back to Illinois, and two trucks blocked the two-lane highway and slowed down to a crawl, creating a massive traffic jam. It sucked. It sucked to be in it, to be honest. Now, fortunately for us, you know, my family, they were big fans of Jeeps, Wranglers, 4x4, and just easily went around it. The truckers weren't too happy with it. So I can certainly empathize with people and say, I get it. But I think of the bigger picture and I say, the fact that truckers can do this and cause a shock to the system, which may actually defend our rights and send an important message, I respect. I absolutely do. In a video sent to Global News by Dawn Davey, trucks can be seen slowly driving on Highway 75 and horns are blasting. Global News reached out to the Canadian Border Service Agency for comment. RCMP Manitoba says a demonstration involving a large number of vehicles is affecting traffic on MB Highway 75 near the Emerson port of entry. Both northbound and southbound lanes are affected. Please drive with caution if you are in the area. Requiring COVID-19 vaccines for truck drivers crossing the border into Canada, quote, is the right thing to do, Health Minister Jean-Yves Duclos said last week as a new vaccine mandate kicks into effect. Unvaccinated foreign national truck drivers are no longer allowed to cross the border into Canada, while unvaccinated Canadian truck drivers still have a right of return, but must test and isolate for 14 days. The U.S. will also tighten its border restrictions this coming Saturday. At that point, Canadian truckers will be denied entry into the U.S., into the States, unless they are fully vaccinated. Insane. Now, my friends, the people of these United States are not going to cry over not being able to get access to Canadian goods. There's certainly things we get from Canada. There's oil and stuff. That's important. We need that. I believe it mostly comes through freight and rail, so that may cause problems with gas prices, but I'm not entirely sure, to be completely honest. I just don't think Canada does enough that's going to freak us out. I suppose we may lose access to certain comedians, but if they're already here, then it's no problem, right? We get a fair amount of our comedians from Canada for some reason. Now, for those that are in Canada, in a very cold place, they don't produce, I believe they get a good portion of their imported goods from the U.S. And most, I think, 90% of Canadians live within 50 or so miles of the U.S. border. This is going to be bad. This will shock the Canadian system substantially. Their economy will likely falter. And that means for people in the U.S., the U.S. dollar should strengthen against the Canadian dollar. So, okay. You know what I see here? For a long time, there was an effort to normalize currencies. Politicians wanted to have a more normalized global economic system. This is not a conspiracy. I'm not talking about a new world order or anything. I'm saying that quite literally there was an attempt to have free trade agreements that would normalize economies. And it was happening. I remember when I was a lot younger, it was like $1 was 7 Canadian, and now it's almost 1 for 1. With this, it's going to rewind everything. They want to say, quote, that has been known for many months, the vaccine mandates, and truckers in very large numbers have chosen to be vaccinated. That's the right thing to do, not only to protect themselves, obviously, but also to protect their businesses and the industry, said Duclos in an interview with the West Block's Mercedes Stevenson. One of the stupidest things I've ever heard, considering that truckers drive in trucks by themselves. They pull up, they unload, sure, there's contact with other people, but they're driving in trucks by themselves. This makes almost no sense. And I will just stress, boy, did I trigger so many leftists. Soledad O'Brien herself. Because I said, someone I know who's triple vaxxed got COVID. What's the point? What's the point? And then people respond with, to prevent COVID. And I'm like, no, my point is there's record-breaking COVID cases across the U.S. So certainly that can't be the point, can it? I have no idea. All right. I would just like some clear answers, and I haven't gotten any. Maybe you guys will talk to your trusted medical professional, and they will give you better answers, because I ain't got any, to be completely honest. Just confusion. Here's what I love. In this story from CTV News, they try and claim that nothing happened. Look at this. No blockages to any of the service roads, access roads, or provincial roads. I was able to access our parking lot at the duty free, so were my coworkers. So from a passenger vehicle perspective, really no impact whatsoever. Laughable. There's videos of people honking, unable to get through, but they don't want you to realize the regular people have said, I'm mad as hell, and I'm not going to take it anymore. Take a look at this video. The cars aren't even moving. This guy says truckers against health apartheid block all southbound lanes to the U.S. and northbound traffic from the U.S. Traffic paralyzed. And sure enough, there are people saying, no, nothing's happening. Nothing to see here. My friends, when you stand up for what you believe in, you will win. Now, unfortunately, one of the challenges we face in the U.S. is that there's a hard divide politically, and there's not going to be an easy way out of this. Half the country doesn't agree. The other half believes in something else. And so everyone's going to stand up for what they believe in, and good. But I think ultimately it will result in a fracturing of this country and a fracturing just across the board. I think it'll impact the entire planet, to be completely honest. Bloomberg reports Trudeau plays dangerous game demanding U.S. truckers have shots. His mandate goes against advice of top food supply expert. Only 50 to 60% of U.S. truckers are vaccinated, ATA estimates. Canada, you're going to go hungry. But it's okay. They have their depanneur produce and wine. I'm sure they'll be okay up in Montreal and in Canada. No, I think most of it comes from the U.S., to be completely honest. Now, Canada certainly can grow their own food and everything, but they have longer winters. You know, it's further north. Ultimately, Trudeau is playing a dangerous game. And you know what? They're being warned. Back in December, CDL Life says group warns that up to 30,000 truckers will immediately quit over vaccine mandates in January. I wonder where we're going. Bloomberg reports, this story from December 27th, expect more shipping chaos as Omicron forces transport workers to quit. About 20% of professional truck driving jobs globally unfilled. Seafarers also reluctant to come back after 2021 experience. I feel like they're lying to us. They tell us, we hear, there will be people quitting their jobs over vax mandates. Today, they just say, oh, it's Omicron. It's Omicron. People are getting sick, so they're not working. Could it be that, sure, you know, I know a lot of people who got Omicron. We're assuming it's Omicron. I know people who got COVID. It's kind of crazy. Like Glenn Beck recently got it. Lots of people got it. And maybe that is the reason people aren't working and things are being shut down. At the local casino, really close to where we live, I was told that the reason they barely had any tables open was because people were out sick. And I'm like, wow, that's crazy. But it could be vaccine mandates. We knew truckers would quit over this. We're now seeing a trucker shortage get worse. Why would we assume it's anything other than truckers are saying no to vax mandates? Take a look at this from NPR. Grocery store shortages are back. Here's some of the reasons why. Well, namely, can I get a big old picture of Joe Biden pointing to this saying, I did that? Joe Biden isn't at fault for literally everything having to do with the economy. Joe Biden, I don't think, is responsible for a pandemic. Joe Biden inherited a system that was already in play. Donald Trump should have fired Fauci. But Joe Biden has had so many failed positions, has pushed so much absurdity that's just backfired or missed the mark that, yes, a lot of this is Joe Biden's fault. To appease his far left, he shuts down Keystone Pipeline. Now, we're going to need to get that crude on freight and, trains and trucks. I believe trucks. Well, trucks are going to be shipping a lot of the fuels. That's going to cause a lot of problems for us because of these border crossings, because the need for drivers, because of potential spills. Joe Biden wanted to appease the left. Joe Biden makes moves against the oil industry, which causes prices to skyrocket. Joe Biden mandates private businesses get their employees vaccinated and loses in the Supreme Court. He has caused a shock to the system, him personally, the Democrats and his administration. And now we're seeing things get worse. Now, I don't know exactly what he could do. Again, I don't think everything is his fault. That would be absurd. However, what we're seeing right now perhaps could have been alleviated by him just backing off and letting the system heal. It's also fair to say that it's the Democratic Party altogether, with many Democrats in these cities pushing these policies, and a lot of this Trudeau's fault. Demanding vaccines to enter Canada? Well, Canada will suffer for that. Over at NPR, they say, no, you're not imagining it. Some grocery store shelves are bare again, conjuring bad memories of spring 2020 for many. Okay, let me tell you something. In Frederick County, where they have mask mandates, the stores don't look too good. It's weird. I wouldn't know because I haven't gone there. Because I go to the West Virginia grocery stores where there's no mandates and everything's fine. It's kind of weird. We've got a couple grocery stores, a chain. The West Virginia branch, which is about, 25 minutes from the Frederick branch, but we live in between, so we go to the West Virginia one. The West Virginia one, totally fine. I didn't even notice anything. We got fresh strawberries, we got whipped cream, we got lunch meats, no issues. But the people, my friends and our workers here who go to Frederick say, the shelves are empty. I wonder if the mandates have something to do with it. I don't know for sure, but I wonder if there are truckers who are just like, I ain't going anywhere near there. Because the DC area, vaccine mandate. They say, The reason for the dwindling stock are numerous, according to food industry analysts, and include some issues that impacted retailers at the beginning of the pandemic, as well as challenges that have cropped up more recently. We're really seeing the perfect storm, Phil Lempert, editor of the website Supermarket Guru, told NPR. Here are some of the reasons. The first, they say, is the Omicron variant. The highly contagious new COVID variant that's causing record infections in the U.S. is undoubtedly one of the biggest stressors of the food industry right now. Grocery store workers are catching the virus in higher numbers and calling out sick, making it tougher for markets to keep shelves stocked. The stores themselves are finding it harder to source products because of the new strain. Vivek Sankaran, CEO of the grocery store chain Albertson, said in an earnings call that the company had been hoping to recover from recent supply issues, but Omicron put a dent in that. There are more supply challenges, and we would expect more supply challenges over the next 4 to 6 weeks. Keep that in mind. I don't know what you should do, but over the next month or so, month and a half, it's probably going to get worse. So make sure you're taking care of yourself, your friends, and your family. I don't think they're wrong on this. I know a ton of people. It's kind of crazy to hear. I know of a ton of people, like Glenn Beck got COVID. And we hear these stories. And I think Crowder a few weeks ago got it. Mike Rowe mentioned he got it over Christmas. A lot of people are getting sick. They say Omicron is very transmissible. So a lot of people are going to get sick. When I hear that, and then where I live, I hear similar stories. Like I mentioned, the casino, they say their dealers all had COVID, so they barely had any tables open. I'm like, wow, even the casino's getting hit by this? People are sick. So I think that's a fair point to mention. But I don't think it is the entirety of the picture. Labor shortages. In addition to workers being infected with COVID, there are those who have simply quit. Lempert said the pandemic has turned grocery stores into battlefields, with employees required to work in person throughout the pandemic, explain food shortages and new public health measures to customers, and try to keep themselves safe and healthy in the process. I'll tell you this. There's probably a lot of people who don't want to work in these conditions. Like I mentioned with truck drivers and masks and vaccines, I'm sure a lot of workers are like, don't care, don't want to be involved. I won't work here. Screw it. I got to tell you, man, I'm looking at the news all day, every day. My business here at Timcast is doing better than ever. It's kind of crazy. Timcast IRL, one of its biggest weeks ever. I mean, with a ton of amazing guests, from Marjorie Taylor Greene to Mike Rowe to Andy No to James O'Keefe. And I'm just like, wow, the CEO of Rumble. But I got to tell you, when you look at everything going on, you really got to take stock of what your life is about. And that's what I see. And I think about this from time to time. The world has gone insane. The media is absolutely insane. We are absolutely, as Yuri Bezmenov described, a demoralized people. People underestimate how severe the clown world really is. Everything's broken, nothing makes sense. And maybe, I think to myself, it's time to just go inward and focus on building something here for me, for the people whose values we share, and to think locally and not worry so much about all this. For the time being, I sit here and I think to myself, we can't stop. We can't just stop. We need to make sure values of individualism and liberty persist. Even if we disagree on policy or we disagree on certain news stories, if we agree on the rights of individuals, we can't stop, because now it's the most crucial time. But when I think that, I think about other people, someone who works at a grocery store. If the goal is to stand up for what we believe in and fight for a better future, many people probably don't think they're doing that by stocking shelves during a pandemic, and so they decide, I want to do something else. I mean, we get tons of email from people saying, what can I do? How can I help? James O'Keefe says the same thing. People email every day, what do I do? Tell me and I will do it. I will fight for these values. Working at a grocery store, they're not being satisfied by this. And I think from grocery stores to movie theaters to bars to whatever, a lot of people are just saying, I want something with more value. I want the future to be better. And that's what people want to do. And that's why I'm still here. And that's why I'm not leaving. And that's why I'm not stopping. But they go to mention trucking and shipping. To get back to the main point, truckers are in short supply, though there's some dispute about how bad the situation really is. Trucking companies are offering higher wages to attract workers, but employment levels still aren't high enough to meet the demand. In December, the White House announced a plan to bolster the trucking industry, including making it easier for drivers to get commercial driver's license, CDLs. And they go to mention severe weather. I don't think the severe weather thing, for the most part, is fair. Because like I mentioned, where we live, right now I look out my windows and it's all ice. It snowed and then rained on the snow and then froze into just ice everywhere. Made it very difficult for people to drive. But you can drive 20 minutes from Frederick County, where there's a mask mandate and limited food on the shelves, to West Virginia, and there's food on the shelves. I think the real issue is when it comes to trucking and shipping and other jobs, there are people who say, I can do this job because I'll be left alone. But when you have a jurisdiction that says, come here and you will not be left alone, they say no. They won't do it. I don't know if it's a guarantee. I don't know if it's absolute, but I think this absolutely is a pressure that is going to have a major impact. And where does it lead us? Well, in my opinion, it leads us to blue districts suffering. People who live there are going to want to leave. There's not going to be food in the shelves. They can't go outside. They can't go to movies. They got to wear masks. They got to be vaccinated. They don't want to do that. And they'll leave and they'll go to Florida and Texas like they are. I have friends and family. They tell me, I want to go back to Chicago. I miss it. And I'm like, sure. But you realize that means you need probably to get 3 shots because you don't have any. There are people I know who have left Chicago. They aren't vaccinated. They didn't want to live in a place where everything was locked down, where you couldn't go outside, where everyone cowers in fear. But then they miss it and they want to go back. And I'm just like, you know what, man? What's going to end up happening is you're going to get there. And then you're going to try and walk into a restaurant because Cook County, like basically the suburbs of Chicago, all have a vax mandate now. Some are defying it. And you're going to be like, I'd like a burger. And they're going to say, I'd like your vax card. And you're going to be like, I don't have one. And they're going to say, get out. And there it is. So what do you do? What do you do? People in blue areas, they're going to have food shortages, labor shortages. Everything will generally get worse. And then they will say, I'm leaving. Now, there's pros and there's cons to that. The cons, well, these people are going to move to red areas where things are pretty good and bring their garbage policies with them. And they've expressed as such. Many have done it intentionally to spread their disgusting values that destroy systems. And many will just do it because they've extracted whatever they can from the system and now they're fleeing. I want to point out something really funny, too. For those that are watching this NPR photo of the freezer is really funny because the freezers are all empty, or the refrigerators, except that on the outside, there's a bunch of chocolate syrup. And then right in the middle, for some reason, Magic the Gathering cards and Pokemon cards. So let it be known that you may be able to go to your Washington, D.C. grocery store, but you will not find milk. You will only find whipped cream, chocolate syrup, and Pokemon cards. Now, if you can subsist off of that, by all means, stay where you are. But many people are going to say, I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take it anymore. And they're going to leave. And you know what? I love it. Take a look at this. Paul Begala, this story is funny, says Democrats' problem is not that they have bad leaders, they have bad followers. Well, Paul, you're half right. It's technically true. The bad followers beget bad leaders, and thus DC is a mess. Where I live, we have open fields. We have farm fresh meats. I can go across the street. I can hop in my car and drive for only a couple minutes. There's a farm, and they got a big cooler. You walk in. It's all self-serve. This is amazing. Honor system. There's a little shack. You pull up on the side of the road. You walk in, open the fridge, grab whatever you want, walk up, swipe your card, and walk right out. No kidding. I don't got to worry about going to any lockdown grocery stores, wearing a mask, anything like that. Farmers might be out there working. They'll wave me like, how's it going? I'll be like, hey, you got any of those tenderloins today? And they'll be like, we got a couple. And I'll be like, all right. In the big city. You go in the grocery store, nothing. These people, they're bad followers. They're bad voters. And because of this, they vote for bad people. And the bad people are either duplicitous or evil. Well, they're duplicitous, evil, or stupid. And then you end up with people like Justin Trudeau, who's like, I think that anyone bringing goods into our country should be forced to be vaccinated. And then you have someone going, Trudeau, like half of truckers from the U.S. aren't. Don't care. And they're like, that means half of our supply will be cut off. Half of our U.S. supply. And he goes, so what? And then what's going to happen? Boy, are the people in Canada going to be in for a rude awakening when they can't get food anymore? Whatever, man. You reap what you sow, I guess. For those of us who live out in rural areas, I would advise you to stop LARPing. If you've moved here from an urban area, if you don't know what you need to do to survive, if you don't know how to take care of your house's problems, take care of animals, or figure out who the farmers are, learn how to have your own garden. We've had a garden for some time. We made a lot of mistakes, but we took it seriously. I'll be completely honest. One of the mistakes we made was we planted all our tomatoes right at once. We planted all the seeds. Now, what worked out for us is that, for the most part, we didn't plant, like we didn't have a strategy for what we were planting. We decided to grow things. But we learned our lesson, and it's important we're learning our lesson now. You see, you don't plant your tomatoes all at once. You plant each plant, whatever you want to grow, 1 week at a time. Why? Because then the tomatoes ripen, you take them off, you prepare them. A week later, the next plant is ripe and available. If you plant them all at once, you end up with 50 tomatoes you can't eat. And that's what happened. But we have chickens. We've learned to take care of them. We've learned to incubate and grow them. The first chickens we hatched, the batch of, I think it was 14 eggs, only 3 made it. I know we're not expert farmers, but we're learning because I take this stuff seriously. Not that I think the world is going to end. I mean, maybe the system will break apart. I certainly think that's happening. But that I take my responsibilities seriously. I will not sit back and do nothing, and then when everything falls apart, just panic and scream, what do I do? So in the meantime, while there is food at the store, I will take seriously my responsibility for my food, for the people who work for me, and say, we'll do our best to be self-sufficient. So what are we doing? We have our own isolated water system and water filtration. It's just a well. It's like everybody has it. We're getting solar systems set up, and we have solar backup batteries because we should be responsible for our own energy needs. We have, we have 15 chickens. That is a lot of eggs every day. And here's the best part. While we do buy food for the chickens, for the most part, chickens eat bugs. In the winter, we are dependent upon getting food for them, and I'm grateful that system exists. In the meantime, we don't have that. We'll have to be serious about this. What will we do for our chickens in the winter when everything's covered in snow and they need food? It won't last forever. So we've got to be careful about how we handle this stuff. We've got to know what we're doing. But in the meantime, we're starting to learn. Because I will not sit back and just cross my fingers and hope someone else will be there to do the work for me. That won't always be the case. In big cities and in blue states, they vote for idiocracy. This will eventually implode on all of us. But what idiocracy did get wrong is that while there are a lot of dumb people who do dumb things, what idiocracy did not talk about at all was, what was it like outside of the big cities for rural individuals? Sure, they were spraying Gatorade on their crops, but I think it's fair to say that if this path continues, there will be disheveled, vagrant urban dwellers who have not learned how to survive outside, and a lot of conservative, more rural individuals who will be fine. We had Mike Rowe on Timcast IRL, and I asked him, a lot of people point out there's this trope that liberals won't survive the apocalypse, conservatives will. And he basically said, yeah, what do you think? And I'm like, all right, you heard it from the dirty jobs guy. These urban dwelling BuzzFeed writers, they won't last 10 minutes. If it really gets bad and they need food, but these conservative rural types are going to tell you exactly how to deal with chickens and goats and grow food and grow crops, and they've lived it. They're more responsible. They're more self-sufficient, and what they do is more environmentally friendly than what cities have to offer. So I take a look at everything that's happened, and I think it's funny. I think the cities are the problem. They're overly dense. They produce massive waste. They waste energy. They waste everything. They're disgusting. It didn't have to be that way, and they can be improved. They are hubs of knowledge and entertainment. That's great, but they've gotten out of control. And I think we can now see how they lead our government astray because everybody just wants the benefit of not having to work or doing an easier job. I'll tell you this, guys. It is infinitely easier for me to look at a camera and talk about my fifis and what I think than it is for me to lift a big bag of chicken feed all day. What's the reward? When I bring out the chicken feed and I feed the chickens, we get what, like 9 or 10 eggs per day? Is that going to feed everybody? It's not. Somehow I've managed to do this job. And the work I do here does feed people every day. It's kind of crazy, isn't it? And I recognize that. And that's why outside of this, I'm taking everything else more seriously because this is not a job that will exist if there really is a major collapse. I mean, to a certain extent it will, but this luxury that, Americans get to have by doing these weird jobs of opining, it is a luxury. We're lucky. I'm lucky. But we'll see how things play out because hopefully I'm wrong. Hopefully everything gets better. But based on the failures of this policy, I think it would be wise for all of you to download a survival guide, to learn about basic animal care, to get away from cities, and always remember, if you do not vote for the same people. In fact, abstain, if anything, or just vote for what the conservative people in the area say because they know better than you do. I'll leave it there. Next segment's coming up at 8 p.m. tonight over at youtube.com/TimcastIRL. Thanks for hanging out, and I'll see you all then.